And welcome back, everyone, to Live Now from Fox. I'm your host, Mike Pache. Thanks again for joining us, as always. All right, next up, we want to talk about some celebrity news, and it has to do with Matthew Perry, the unfortunate death when he overdosed on ketamine. There is more fallout now from that, we are learning, and it has to do with a woman known as the Ketamine Queen. So let's bring in right now TMZ's Michael Babcock with a breakdown of the latest from this fallout.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me. Yeah, this woman, like you said, the nickname that has, that she's been dubbed with is the Ketamine Queen. And she really, along with this Dr. Placentia, were the two main targets of the federal government's investigation into what essentially was this drug ring. And ultimately, she is the fifth and final person. All have agreed to ultimately plead guilty to some form of charge related to the death of Matthew Perry. In Jasveen's case, that it's her real name, Jasveen Sangha, she is going to plead guilty to 5 different charges, Mike, 3 of those being ketamine distribution, the other being 1 count of distributing ketamine resulting in death, and another charge that had to do with essentially operating a premises while there was drug activity. All told, she faces still, Mike, up to 65 years in prison, although it's expected that she is going to receive significantly less than that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the defense attorneys, and she's got a good defense attorney in Mark Garagos, and the prosecutors agree that they are going to suggest to the judge. The judge can completely ignore what they're saying, what they're asking, and the judge can hand down whatever sentence he is obviously allowed to by law. And again, that could be decades and decades in prison for this 42-year-old woman who, again, was one of the main targets of this investigation.
Yeah, so true. In this death, almost 2 years since learning there of the passing of Matthew Perry. And I think it jarred a lot of people, Michael, when his death happened, because he was just fresh off a book tour from his autobiography, really detailing him coming clean from his addictions.
No, I think that's a great point, Mike. And the really sad part about this is that Matthew Perry, at least initially, was using the ketamine as a therapy to help him with some of the other issues, addiction issues that he had. And he was seeing a doctor, and the doctor was overseeing the distribution of the substance. But he obviously then at some point, Matthew did begin looking in other places for this drug that he seemingly got addicted to it in itself, by itself, Mike. And because of that, he then starts going to this woman who is, in contact with these other doctors and getting these drugs and going around his physician. And he's obviously taking these drugs. And on that night in October of 2023, he was in his home and he was in the hot tub. And as a result of the ketamine, it had rendered him unconscious. And he dips below the water and tragically loses his life. And I think it's a message to anybody out there that, if you think you're just selling a drug and that's it, and you are not, bound to whatever happens, that's not the case anymore, at least. The authorities have shown they will go after people who do sell drugs. And if that really results in the death of somebody, they will hold you accountable. And in this case here, again, she could potentially do over 60 years in prison. So a ton on the line for a woman who was 42 years old, who presumably could spend the rest of her life in a prison cell.
Yeah, so well said, Michael, because, so many people think, okay, that transaction's over. That's going to be the end of that story. And then, but wow. And then hearing, too, from these stories of this group of people, including her, just like overcharging him so much, knowing that he had the cash to do this.
Right. I think that was really one of the most damning things, Mike. There were some text message communications, and it were between the doctors and between, Jasveen, and the way they talked about Matthew Perry. I mean, it kind of hurts your heart to hear them. I mean, make fun of him and, how much will this moron pay for these drugs? And some of the stuff was just so cold and callous, and they knew that he was struggling, and for them to talk about him like that and to seemingly take advantage of him, it's especially for the doctors who obviously, the Hippocratic Oath, you're going to do no harm above all else. And to find out that this was actually happening, it kind of makes you feel sick.
Yeah, terrible on so many levels. Michael Babcock, thanks so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. We always appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks, Mike.